All right, welcome to our first ever Connect. We're going to get started. First ever Connect presented by Fluid Interiors. We're currently making the best of a challenged situation with the remote work that we're all faced with. What we're hoping to do today is bring you some relevant and interesting content on a regular basis through this format. Of course, we're going to start today with COVID-19 and the impact on our industry. My name is Anton Newman. I'm the Director of Business Strategy at Fluid Interiors. I'll be your moderator today. I want to introduce you to our incredible panel for today's discussion. First is Ann Fritz. Ann is a partner and a director of interior design at ESG Architecture and Design, a firm specializing in hospitality, multifamily residential, and workplace solutions in the Twin Cities and throughout the U.S. As a 15-year veteran of the firm, she's pleased to join us today and share her perspective and hear from others in the industry about how we're all weathering today's challenging times. Welcome, Ann. Jessica Mogilka is also with us. Jessica is a tenant rep broker with JLL based in Minneapolis and the host of a podcast about commercial and corporate real estate called The Fly-Through. She's done projects not only here in Minneapolis, but around the world. Thank you, Jessica, for joining us. Heather Weerheim is also joining. She's the Director of Business Development for Greiner Construction, a Minneapolis-based construction company with customers ranging from multifamily, healthcare, and corporate. Heather has more than 13 years of experience in the commercial construction arena. We're grateful to have Heather with us as well. And finally, Megan Duffy. Megan is the creative director at Fluid Interiors. She helps provide thought leadership in addition to operational leadership at Fluid. With more than 15 years of experience in the interior design business, Megan brings a diverse background of corporate and healthcare project experience. She provides a unique perspective in the world of furniture. Thank you, Megan. So like any panel, we welcome conversation and questions. So on the side of your panel over there, you'll see a chat bar. Please feel free to log some questions and we'll tackle them at the end of our conversation. So let's get started and welcome in our panel here. Hey gang, how are you?
Good.
Doing good. How are you?
Wonderful. Let's start with you, Jessica. With the world of uncertainty, what immediate changes to actual workload have you seen? Are there parts of your business still busy while other parts are lagging? Each of you represent a different part of the typical process. Jessica, yours being the real estate transaction. What are you seeing today in the market that's impacting your business?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Anton. There's a lot of impacts that we're seeing across the spectrum of projects. I'd say in general, we're seeing a lot of companies, if there's any way that they can at all, just hitting the pause button right now. Something like 75% of real estate projects across the country have hit the pause. So in some ways, we're a little bit quieter in that way, but in other ways, we're incredibly busy trying to support our clients and talking about what are some of the ways that you can deal with these immediate impacts, business continuity, liquidity conversations, immediate triage conversations, how to engage a landlord if you need rent relief. Folks are kind of moving from that triage position into starting to have a conversation about reentry, starting to have conversations of thinking a little bit longer term about how and what they need their real estate to do for them in the coming months and year even. So that's kind of the quick snapshot of what we're seeing is a lot of collective holding of breath and pausing and starting to think about now that some of the immediate triage is kind of contained and understood.
So, Ann, I want to throw it to you. If we know that real estate most naturally moves into design after a deal is done, and if deals aren't getting done, that project typically halts. With 75% of deals being put on pause, are you feeling the effects from a design perspective as well?
Absolutely. At ESG, we have had about 160 people, and we took some staff reductions a few weeks ago and reduced our staff by 40 people, which was extremely hard on us as leaders and as a family unit that cares about our team so much. But we work for 90% developers is most of our work. So especially hotel and hospitality projects, a lot of those are more cautious and slowed down when they're triaging in a different way. When they're at 1 or 5% occupancy for a hotel, a remodel is the last thing on their minds. A lot of our smaller TI and workplace projects, anything that was maybe not as high a priority can totally go on the back burner. Those things went on hold. But a lot of the larger, big new construction, new build projects are still moving forward. And we're really grateful for those and for the faith our clients have in us to work remotely thanks to technology. And we miss each other, but we're getting by and making it work.
Perfect. Heather, how about you? The typical indication of future work is budget pricing, I suppose, with real estate pausing. Are you guys as busy as you have been with budget pricing, or is that kind of slowed down as well?
You know, surprisingly enough, we've had minimal disruption to our day-to-day. We're receiving RFPs still. We're still logging opportunities in our CRM. We're hopeful and we're optimistic that things are going to continue that way. Short term right now, we're remaining optimistic. I just don't know. It's too hard to predict long term.
Mm-hmm. Megan, to you, Fluid being a furniture company that has both design and service as a business model, tell us a little bit about how both sides of the business have been impacted.
Yeah, I think we've seen the way that a project typically moves through our organization impact that on the immediate workload as well, where design has still been pretty busy. A lot of things were in the pipeline, in the works, and so those projects that can move forward still are. And especially on our coordination side, actually getting orders placed, receiving acknowledgements, a lot of work happening there still. The slowdown's been more on the installation side, and that was really due to some projects being put on hold, being paused, and then we have supply chain issues. Obviously, every state is going through a different variation of either a stay-at-home, a shelter-in-place, or none of the above. And so that really does impact where we can receive product. And if we don't have product, then there isn't anything to install. So we're constantly trying to monitor that. And I think it's one of the challenges is that every day some of that workload changes.
So Jessica, I wanted to go back to you. Ann mentioned that many of our clients are developers, so clearly impacted from a financial perspective and prospecting in that business. What about your client base? Has there been a diversification of different types of strategies within your portfolio?
So I think every company is dealing with this so differently from every other company that to talk about too many broad strategies that people are trying to figure out it's been an interesting conundrum of how to have conversations that just painting too broad of a brush isn't working. So we're really seeing everything from retail clients who we just don't know if they're going to make it, and a lot of ownership groups being very understanding, if you will, for restaurants and retail. I'd say for some of our larger corporates, some of the big global companies started dealing with this before some of our more local clients did. And so they have a slightly different view of how the waves of reentry and the waves of how localities and different governments in different countries are dealing with the crisis. So each country seems to be at a different stage in their understanding or their government aid packages. So depending on where you are in the world, that will really impact how you're dealing with it on a country by country basis. And then I would say some companies are really busy. They're ramping up. They're trying to figure out how to fulfill some really urgent and important needs out in the community. And those folks are just going gangbusters, trying to figure out short-term space. How do I find chairs? How do I get a hold of the things and the people that we need? And how do we train them when we're all on a Zoom call instead of, on-ramping and onboarding folks here? So it is across the spectrum and absolutely individual based on every single business, their company, exactly where they are in the world. So broad brushes aren't working too well for this particular crisis.
That makes a lot of sense. Heather, how about you? You guys have a fairly diverse client base. What are you guys feeling?
Yeah, I wanted to add, you mentioned the developers, and an interesting trend happened because financing is so cheap right now that some of the local developers, specifically for low-income housing, are making a move now on some opportunities. So I know we have one in the works that we're going to be signing a contract on Friday that wasn't expected. So that's been a trend that wasn't expected, and obviously worked out well is going to work out well for us.
It's fascinating. Yeah, an opportunity that exists inside of a strange time. And what are your developers and clients saying that have put their project on hold? What's the interface been like with your team and theirs? Is it just kind of a waiting game to see what happens, or is there a more strategic help that they're looking for?
The few that have put things on hold, it's more of a temporary pause, like you said. Wait it out and see. Let's not go gangbusters and spend a bunch of fee and money and not know where things are going to go. We've never been in this situation before. A lot of us thankfully lived through the recession, which in a way prepped us for how to respond and think about profitability and think about getting things done and making sure you have enough staff, and not waiting and holding on to people longer than we can really afford to, which is really hard. But I think our clients are looking at this as a temporary situation that we will get through. They want to move forward. They have, a lot of them have the funding for these projects already kind of being held for these specific things to happen. And so they're looking to us to help bring that to reality. But I think they're just pumping the brakes. They're not totally stopping. I would say a lot of our developer clients talk to economists all the time, and they're saying, 5 to 6 weeks from now we'll reevaluate, and we're really feeling like there will be an uptick, and then there will be a boom of development once we're all kind of released from this current stalling period. So I think we're all hoping for that, and it'd be great to feel like we're fighting for staff on projects that need to bring back some we miss dearly, and really kind of follow through on those projects.
Yeah, we're all hoping for the same thing, and I think you're absolutely right about that. Megan, I know Fluid has a lot of global clients that have relationships kind of built in and purchase furniture on a regular basis. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship and if those are maintaining? And also, we've heard a lot about essential workers, essential businesses. What is the prioritization of clients in that capacity look like as manufacturers, I'm sure, are challenged with that?
Yeah, I mean, we experienced the same piece when it comes to some of those larger customers that have global contracts, things that were in the works, and a lot of it relating to their fiscal year spending. And so some things, dollars still need to be spent by, if it's the end of May, the end of June, what have you. And some of these orders were sort of in process of happening. And we're able to work with Hayworth and other manufacturers to really prioritize those, interfacing with the government to ensure that we can have workers and have production happening, and spending a lot of time connecting with our customers that are essential or critical infrastructure. The verbiage changes depending on what state you're referring to, and securing letters really saying that their project is critical and it needs to continue to move forward. So definitely the capacity to produce and receive has slowed down, but we see that there will be an uptick in that in the near future as well. So really here in Minnesota, when we're looking at projects, we just want to make sure that we're taking care of our staff so that they're safe when they enter sites. And a lot of those sites now, there's less people there. And I'm sure as Heather can attest to with construction now and how those sites are being organized, there's probably a lot more free and clear sites for our installation than we've ever had before.
So that leads me into my next question, which I'm fascinated at the answers, because each of what you do is so personal and requires such a trust and relationship, and oftentimes an in-person meeting. Clearly, we're all learning how to navigate the world without in-person meetings. But how are you each encouraging authentic connections, or how are you doing your jobs with your clients or even your teammates during this time? Is there anything in particular, Ann, that you guys are doing to handle finish meetings or presenting concepts to clients that is unique or different now?
Yeah, I think luckily we had all implemented Microsoft Teams about 6 months ago, so we were accustomed to it, but now we're all pros and everyone's learned how to put themselves on mute. Everyone has heard their colleagues, kids and dogs in the background in meetings, which I think makes us all feel human and connected, which is good. But honestly, being able to chat with my team just in a quick chat has been helpful. Sending just quick FaceTime videos. We've had to do FaceTime for site walks, digital submittal approvals for the construction administration phase. We're having sales reps send samples to our houses, and we're building pallets in our living room floors, our spare bedrooms. A few people have snuck into the office on their own to grab something from the library and quickly leave or photograph it, which of course we don't encourage, but we want people to be safe, to your point. But sometimes you just got to do your job, and we're getting creative. We've done FaceTime with installers like Fluid on a job site, trying to do a FF&E furniture install or accessory install, where we're saying, move this to the left, move this to the right, looking at things and really, really having to depend on technology. But I also think another thing we're trying to do is create that sense of team and camaraderie with the ESG employees as a whole, to check in with them regularly, to do virtual happy hours. All those things are definitely in full effect at ESG.
How about your clients, Ann? Have they been pretty understanding of the process and the challenges that exist in regards to reviewing finishes or even approving finishes or picking pallets? I have to imagine that's difficult.
Yeah, surprisingly, because they're all in the same boat, and they're all over the country, and we're all dialing into a meeting where 30 people are looking at something. And luckily, with digital, you can do digital finish boards. There's a lot of really great photography of product online, or we will take photos on our own homes and put it up on the screen. We use Revit software with Enscape and other 3D modeling tools as well. Not everyone has that capability in their in-home computer, so we've had to kind of find some other ways to show things visually to clients so they get it, but they understand. I think the fact that we're literally all in this together in the whole world gives us all a little of a grace period and makes people a little more understanding and accommodating.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. A basic understanding. Jessica, it's hard to lease real estate or buy real estate without seeing it. How are you accomplishing that from a remote perspective, or are you guys still doing real tours?
No, we're not doing real tours. I have heard a couple of people say that they, from our agency landlord representative side, that they will go unlock the door, kind of prop it open, leave some papers there, and walk people through. We're really lucky actually at JLL. To Ann's point, not everybody has all of the technology, but we've been working on a whole suite of technology things like virtual tours. So we've been doing virtual tours. If we need to, we'll have the landlord's agency broker on, because they have all of that extra color about the buildings, and they can answer questions, or they'll hold their phone up if they don't have a 3D model and walk through the space. And all of our clients, nobody can go anyway. So usually, oftentimes we have folks from out of town that will come in for an important tour. And so a lot of those have really been put on hold anyway, or let's just wait and see for 6 weeks. We'll just wait and see for a little bit longer. But otherwise, yeah, we're doing virtual tours. We're just like Ann, and I feel like everybody, we're getting creative. It's lots and lots of phone calls. I didn't think I would be so tired of being on Zoom in my entire life, and I thought I was on the phone a lot before, but I mean, it's just that, back and forth on the phone. Lots of one-on-one conversations, and a lot fewer group emails, I think, and just a lot of one-on-one touch points and conversations. And how are you feeling about this? Where are we with this? Where is your head and your company's head? And talk to me about the culture of where you guys are thinking and how you're responding to all of this, because the cultural response from each company is really dictating for us how we engage. Are you still just going, or are you all just taking a pause and everybody's working from home? And so it's back to that really individual response again. So technology and lots of phone calls.
I would imagine, Jessica, that perhaps it's even an opportunity to deepen some relationships, even though you're not meeting in person. Perhaps you're slowing down and engaging in deeper conversations about strategy and long-term things. Is that fair in some cases?
Yeah, I think it's fair in some cases. I think there's it's really interesting because some companies are so busy, the last thing they want to think about, like a hotel renovation, they're not going to renovate their hotel right now. A lot of companies, if they're talking big strategy, they're not going to continue with a strategy that was partially baked 3 months ago because the world looks really different right now. So trying to be a thought leader sometimes I think can be a little misplaced in this because I happen to know a little bit about a little bit of stuff all over the place, but man, I don't have a crystal ball any more than anybody else does. And so to come out really strongly with some things and say like, this is what's going to happen, which is what I think a natural inclination is. I don't think that helps deepen relationships, and we have to be really careful that we don't know the answers to all of that, but it doesn't necessarily help someone build a strategy for the next year or two really easily. It's going to be a start, stop, up, down, in, out kind of a conversation. And I hope that we're creating relationships that are lasting and valuable for people and deepening those. But I also don't want to be too opportunistic, so it's a fine balance for everybody these days.
Heather, how about you? I suppose somewhat advantageous because you've got a lot of guys that were already working in the field, but they're impacted as well. How have you guys created more authentic connections between your team and clients during this challenge?
Well, technology obviously has been huge, and ultimately with Procore, we've always had the technology there. Now we're finally really using it to its fullest capability, where we're doing on-site walkthroughs, punch lists on video, having the superintendent do a site tour using Procore has been huge in order to get things done. But I do want to talk to you about a funny conversation I had with a PM in our office who's kind of a hard charger. And I asked him the other day, I said, can you get a 20,000 square foot tenant interior project done in 10 weeks, or are those days over? And again, you guys just take this with a grain of salt, but he said, oh, I can do it, but it's the decision makers that need to give me feedback or be able to respond in a timely manner on technology. And it's funny because I know people who are parents are dealing with teaching their kids online learning, and maybe their response times are lagging. So anyway, I thought it was I get it. He's confident that he can still get projects done, but he's concerned that the communication lag is gonna be problematic.
Yeah, you guys were Greiner early adopters of technology with Procore and iPads and all of that, so you probably had a leg up on the rest of us in this in preparing for this. You guys are in front of it. It seems like
we're doing our best, yeah. And but as far as authentic virtual connections, I want to touch on that quickly because my role has changed now, or I'm in business development, where before it was project management. So right now for me, it's not the time to be opportunistic. Like Jessica said, like I'm not reaching out really for new clients, but it is an opportunity for me to touch base with our existing clients and our longstanding clients and nurture those relationships and check in. How are you? We're in this together, and that type of stuff.
Yeah, perhaps an unintended reset, which is always welcomed when you can reconnect with your best client is always the one you already have. So a good opportunity there. Megan, furniture is probably not dissimilar from the challenge that Ann and ESG have in regards to design and presenting things. Are you guys faced with some of the similar sort of obstacles she has, and are you tackling it the same way?
Yeah, I think really the virtual presentations, and I think frankly one of the biggest challenges that way is there's so many types of virtual technology. So really depends on who's orchestrating the meeting, if it's Teams or Zoom or a WebEx. So we're getting skilled at being able to navigate in all of those different settings, but certainly being able to present content and get feedback. I think what I have learned on some of those project meetings is having more participants from our side, because everything's crammed into a little screen. So one person can present, one person can take notes, someone else can be looking information up, because it's kind of hard to present your screen and then move around for additional information. But customers are really great about that. The other piece I think is interesting just to see when you show up if people have their cameras on or not. I know at Fluid, we kind of from day one were like, show your camera. I don't care if you've showered. We just want to see your face. And it really does make a difference. And a lot of other clients are the same way. They're like, oh, I can see you. And others are like, wait, I didn't know we were showing our cameras today. So you just sort of navigate through and meet people where they're at. And most of the time you're just presenting the content anyway. So we've been able to succeed.
So, Jessica, I know you said you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to make you all squirm just a little bit and try to predict the future, and maybe not so much predict, but just try to guesstimate what the impact of this thing will have on our businesses long term. And I know we can't predict the future, but I imagine, Jessica, in your business, this will impact the way leases are written, the way that people are understanding those. What other impacts are you thinking that may come out of this, just as an overall overarching thing?
Oh boy. Okay. Well, I'm not going to guess what's going to win, but part of some of the things that are being talked about is there's the camp of we're going to need more space because we need 6 feet in between everyone, lower densities in office, and everyone's going to come back, but we need to have more space. We're going to take desks out, that kind of thing. There's another camp that says people and companies will realize that working remote is super awesome. So we're not going to need any more space because so many more people are going to work from home and it's going to be remote. And so we need less space after all of this, and fewer people are going to feel safe and secure going into the office. I've heard a few people now starting to say that perhaps the office will be more focused on the social aspect and really reevaluating why we have offices and what is the point of having an office. So is the point of the office to come and meet all of you people face to face and have a face to face meeting and meet clients and do some of that kind of togetherness work, but most focus work will happen somewhere else in a third location or possibly at home if you have a home office. All of which says, I have no idea. I do think that companies will have to, the one big change will be around cleaning and cleanability of surfaces. And I'm not an expert at this sort of stuff, but touchless entry, I think technology will, the adoption of certain technologies is accelerating significantly right now, and that will continue, and some of it will continue to stay. Like, I do think that we'll have more Zoom meetings in the future and have less people flying around the country to have that FaceTime. We'll have Zoom FaceTime instead. I think e-commerce is going to be a big winner in all of this. There'll be more warehouses. I think grocery will look different at the end of all of this. Possibly Kroger is doing a whole set of really interesting things around little tiny warehouses that have robots that just pick all the food, and it's only a pickup location. So it's really efficient. It's tiny. It's in the neighborhood. Grandma zips by, grabs her bag of groceries, and that's the end of it. So those are some of the things that are out there, and you can't make me. I'm not going to pick what's going to happen.
I won't hold you to any of them. And it sounds like much of what you talked about earlier with the office was impact on the way we work, and perhaps flows into the design and how you're thinking about space. Have your leaders started processing any of that as an organization as to how you guys need to communicate differently or challenge your clients to think differently, or is that not there yet?
Absolutely. Actually, it's been a recent and frequent conversation, especially on our workplace team. Exactly to Jessica's point, is it we all get to work from home now and we trust each other to just get our work done and be heads down and be efficient? Or are we going to have these big giant offices where we're all 6 feet apart and we foam in, foam out like a hospital delivery room? I think we're thinking a lot about just the trust. I know at ESG, we always kind of brag about our culture and the magic that happens when we're all together, and that synergy and that being able to collaborate and bounce ideas off of each other, and the hustle and bustle when the office is full of clients and big meetings are getting prepped for. Like, that feels good, and we miss that energy. However, as you know, we've grown over the years. We've been short on desks, and to know that maybe there's people that can work from home part of the time, and they have the technology, we have the software, all those things. I'm on an airplane normally all the time. I never thought I'd miss the airport, but I really do. But there are meetings. I did an interview at home for a job that's in Arizona to a developer in Denver, and won it over the phone, with a presentation I just went through, and it's doable. I think there's a lot of resources we could save in time and energy by being more flexible and allowing the technology to help us get there. But it will be interesting. I hope that we don't have cleanable, wipeable surfaces on every finish or every surface I touch, because I would really miss mohair and all those other beautiful, lovely things that we get to play with as designers. But it's something we really are going to have to start thinking about, and it's going to affect how we design moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. A world clad in quartz would be quite depressing, wouldn't it? Heather, what about you? How about supply chain management? Any of the challenges that come with construction? You guys, you don't just take lumber and install it. It comes from 10 different places. How does that? What does that look like affecting you guys long term, perhaps?
There's been rumors of some millwork shutdown and carpet mill shutdowns, or shipping, manufacturing plants shutting down. And we've been dealing with that. That's been okay. What has been affecting us is light fixtures, or just there's small parts that come from China that we're not able to get, that somehow randomly affect our job. So we've just been trying to do the best by being nimble and figuring out a solution or a new product in order to make it work with the project timeline.
I wonder if that is and Ann, maybe back to you, an unintended consequence of this, that perhaps there are diversification of where we're sourcing products and where they come from, and just more conscious of that in your project, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. We already saw that big time. You mentioned quartz earlier with the tariffs on quartz, specifically in China, and then looking at India and Turkey and all sorts of other places. But we've had the same issue more on the FF&E side for hotels, with product not being able to get delivered that's stuck somewhere, and they've closed borders on one country or another, and the installers' hands are tied, and the product's been paid for, and it's sitting completely fabricated, custom, gorgeous chandeliers or light fixtures, and just got to wait. And the clients don't always like to hear that, but it's the reality of what we're dealing with.
It is very real. Megan, I've been to, I was at a gas station very early on in this stay-at-home thing, and there was a sneeze guard between me and the attendant. We're not headed for conference rooms with sneeze guards on the tables, are we?
No, I haven't seen any of that come through yet, but the folks at Hayworth are engaging with dealers across the country, and we spent a couple of long meetings last week doing idea generation, really around this, looking at not only for ourselves, but for all of our customers, how we might need to come back to work, and not knowing when that will be, or what people's expectations are. But certainly looking at sort of that runway of short-term needs. How can we adapt products that are already in place, or that we already have the ability to manufacture with minimal cost and timing to get that ready? And then what's the long-term impacts that we're looking at? Certainly material cleanability, and there's different schools of thought on that. If it's easy to wipe down, it may live longer on that surface. So looking to the medical professionals to help them sort of look over everything that we're considering, so that we can make the best recommendations going forward. Really, everyone wants to come back to a place that is safe, and a lot of what we're doing around those social spaces are creating a place for people to connect. And I think that is part of why people want to be in the office. So how do we still encourage that? And I think it will change over time. In the beginning, it may be spread out, there may be staggered starts, but as things change in the medical community, where we hopefully will have a vaccine or other preventative measures, things can start to look a little bit more like what they were before. But I think we're all looking at this saying, there's no reason that this couldn't happen again. And so how do we better prepare our world to react in the future?
Yeah, it is challenging. So much of this, or frankly, all of it is so reactionary, right? And it'll be curious to see what sticks around. And as this pandemic passes and they find a vaccine and we're on to the next challenge in our lives, professionally and personally, what is here to remain, right? So in that vein, I'd be curious if any of you have learned anything about your businesses or perhaps the way you're working you didn't expect to learn from this work at home period. Ann, you mentioned being able to share virtually with clients. Is there anything advantageous you can apply moving forward to make your business even more effective when you go back to work?
I think a lot of the things I said earlier about relying more on technology and just being more open to it. And we've definitely reestablished our expectations. It's amazing what we can accomplish. I'm downloading all sorts of cool drawing and sketching apps to use on my tablet so I can redline or sketch or fit plan with designers and then shoot them off some ideas quickly. And it's stuff that's been around forever, but I just haven't personally tapped into some of those resources that are there. And now it's forcing us to think, okay, how can I do this differently? How can I effectively get my job done no matter where I am, whether I'm at home or in the office or traveling on the road? I think I will definitely use a lot of the technology and skills, and like I said, we're all going to be experts at conference calls, and no one's ever going to be on mute when they're talking anymore because we're all going to know what to do now. Finally, get it.
Yeah, I didn't think I would ever like Teams, but I do like the idea that you can shut off your camera and mute your camera and mute your microphone and go walk away for a second and come back like you never missed anything. It's amazing, right?
Go yell at your kids.
Yeah, right. It's hard to do that in a real meeting. Megan, how about you for Fluid? Is there anything that we've learned at Fluid that you can take away and apply moving forward?
Yeah, obviously, technology is a huge piece. We've migrated to Teams as well. And so like a lot of people's stories, we were using it, but adoption was kind of so-so depending on who you were. And now it's sort of forced adoption and getting really good at that. I think some of the other pieces we're looking at, like virtual tours of the studio, which we've had to do as part of still interview and RFP responses during this time, have been really successful. And we want to have a robust method to do that, but at the same time to be able to integrate that technology into the in-person components as well. I think personally, the outcropping of other creative outlets that I've seen. This morning, I actually participated in a free virtual writing session from Creative Mornings, a field trip. So being able to connect with people across the globe and share that with people locally is just a wonderful thing. And I hope that that continues more and more, that we make those connections that we couldn't before just because of geographic locations.
Jessica, I want to throw a question to you regarding small businesses. How and what is the rent relief being enacted, and what are some of the different ways that it can be negotiated? How are you helping your tenants in current situations that are challenged with their bills? What are you doing to help them?
Yeah, so that's again a spectrum. So we're seeing some ownership groups that are just sending out notes saying across the board, don't ask, we're not giving rent relief. More commonly, it's folks are leading with empathy and being really empathetic and understanding that this is a really challenging time. But ownership groups absolutely want you to prove that you need rent relief. We are seeing a few players out there just across the board asking for rent relief, whether they really, really need it or not. So landlords are often requiring a lot of financial information. So if you need rent relief, certainly be prepared to pull all of your financials together, your balance sheet, how much cash you have in the bank, what other government aid and programs are you applying for, and some of those sorts of things. We're seeing somewhere on like 2 to 3 months-ish. It's not a particularly long time, and it's not free. You will pay for it at some point. So it'll be amortized into the rest of your rent for that term. You'll add term on to the end of your lease. So if you have 3 years left and you want 3 months free, maybe you'll have a 3.5-year lease at the end of your negotiation. So you're getting your free rent plus a little extra term to make it up to the landlord. If you're retail and one of those kind of really, really hard hit restaurant retail kind of F&B, it's a different conversation. Our advice is consistently pay your rent, because if you're in default of your rent, landlords don't want to talk to you. It annoys them a whole lot. So if you can, pay it and expect to justify why you can't pay it, and hopefully we'll help you get through it. And a lot of ownership groups very much want their tenants and their companies to succeed, and if they can help you find a way to succeed. And I think everyone on this call and in the industry feels similarly. If there's anything we can do to help, that's where a lot of ownership groups are kind of starting as well. So it's nice, you know, I mean, it's a nice, yes, you have to prove it, and maybe we'll bury you under a little bit of paperwork, but it's nice to see that people are really showing up to try and support our companies, especially our small businesses.
Yeah, that is wonderful to hear that everybody understands what's happening, and that some people just need an outlet. Megan, I want to pop it to you, and then Ann, you can jump in if you want to. The Fluid has a social spaces team that's dedicated to ancillary furniture, and that in and of itself is a design solution that's going to be impacted by this, or at least theoretically, with the way that social spaces are outlaid, and perhaps the lack of people wanting to use them in break rooms or whatever it is. How are you seeing that being impacted, and what does that look like in the future?
Yeah, I think especially Hayworth, who has a dedicated social spaces representative here in the market, which is a more newly created role to help support all of the increase that we were seeing around social spaces, is really looking at how do we do that differently. As I mentioned before, I think in the beginning there might be some more spacing out so that you could still potentially use spaces. There could be some limiting of sort of one person in there at a time. I think the cleanability of those will be a little bit more challenging, especially because of all the lovely upholsteries, and that can be a little bit tougher to wipe down. And I think that the social spaces, as well as unassigned, any kind of common spaces that will be shared, there's just going to have to be better cleaning products available right there, and a really well-established protocol for how you enter the space and exit to maintain that safety. The challenging part will be probably outside of your tenant space, where a particular company could set their protocol for how they want to use the space, but in the common lobbies of buildings where we've seen a lot of activity, and actually a lot of companies relying on that extra space instead of taking more of their own. Now you're sharing it with people you don't know, and how will buildings sort of maintain a safety level there, I think remains to be seen, but I'm hopeful that the social spaces will continue. It might just look a little different in the short term.
Yeah, I can manage cleaning them for a while, right? And you've got a lot of smart people in your office. What I'm sure your clients are reaching out to you, asking you for guidance on what's next, and what are you guys thinking about? Can you share a little bit about what your clients are asking you?
Yeah, a lot of them right now, surprisingly, are still wanting to design these really great, cool social experiential spaces. It's really hard for designers that get excited about all that to think about having to change the way we do our job. We always think about making something warm and comfortable and cozy and inviting. And the more people that can have that interaction, the better. Those opportunities for interaction are what we want. We want the energy, and we also want the variety with quiet heads down space. And so I think a lot of clients at this point are looking forward to just getting the spaces to work for them and for their specific needs, but they're asking us for flexibility and for variety, for the ability to make it work for a large assembly or quiet heads down, to have private phone booths and rooms for 2 people versus a larger meeting room or a large gathering space. So it's less about creating these big, impactful architectural moves and more about letting the space work for the people using it based on their needs that day or that hour, or that time that they're going through in terms of how their business works. So flexibility is key. But I think as designers, our jobs are to be creative and push the limits. And if we have to make something still feel warm and inviting and like a place you want to be in, it can't be cold and sterile and all just bleach cleanable. So there's going to be a big struggle for us as designers to be creative and figure out how to get that human-centric, design-forward solution still think about people's health and safety.
I think you're absolutely right. Heather, real quickly to you, it doesn't sound like there's been any immediate impacts on supply chain stuff, but as you talked about lighting perhaps being delayed and some other products that are late, it may be too early to answer this, but I imagine some of that may impact your certificate of occupancy or the ability to finish projects. How are you guys planning to preparing to navigate that uncharted waters?
Sure. I apologize. My husband's working on a project and there's an air compressor going on right now. So I'm really sorry. But actually, for any of our projects that we have permits in place for right now, we're able to get city inspections pretty easily. And I think that they are providing, there is an opportunity to put in temp lighting if we don't have the right light fixtures, although that does provide complications where we might have to be working over furniture, which is never good. But it's just, we're being creative, and I really think that the city inspectors are being helpful as much as they can.
Very smart. Last question, Jessica, goes to you, and then I want to open it up to you all to see if you have questions for each other, and then certainly the audience can pipe in if you haven't already written a question in the side over there. Please do so. We'd love our panelists to try to answer them for you as best we can. You talked a little bit about reentry, and we're optimistic that that's coming soon, even if it shifts again. What does that start to feel like for you, your organization, and perhaps your clients? And what does that adaptation mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just was on a call this morning with a colleague from Hong Kong. So we had been hearing that at least for JLL, our offices were back up to 80 or 90%. And I think the reality of that is a little bit more nuanced. And the big point that I took away from my conversation with him is that it's not over when you think it's over, and it's not a fast reentry. So Hong Kong, for example, they went back to work. People were starting to go back to work, 40 to 50% occupancy in some offices, and they had a pretty significant resurgence of the virus, and everybody is now back to shelter in place. So we've been doing a lot of looking to Asia for how their reentry is going. And I think Singapore is another cautionary tale, not to end on a negative note, but they have shut down everything, and you can be fined like $7,000 if you're caught outside of your immediate neighborhood. And the second time you violate that, you go to jail. It is Singapore, which is fairly rigid. However, I think that the reentry becomes even less clear for us in the US as we look to our Asian colleagues and offices and understand that it's just not going to be easy. And I think there's such a huge unknown medical piece of the reentry. So, and this goes back to some of the things I said earlier about not jumping the gun about what reentry looks like. I think it's going to look really different depending on your company. A lot of my clients are saying we're going to be super, super careful and conservative before we send people back. And then other clients have essential employees that are on the manufacturing of food line, and they need to be there right now. And so it goes back to this really individualistic conversation again. And if you have folks like Delta has call centers that are super critical to that they can't send people home to do. So they have a socially distant call center that is in an airplane hangar actually, and built it super, super fast. I think those are the examples where companies are going to say, these are our essential staff that we need to have on site, and this is how we're going to support them. And it's going to be face masks, lots of cleaning, increased cleaning protocols, social distancing inside of the office, really clear protocols around who sits where and when. And I think it'll be rolling. I think we'll try a few times in a few different places. We'll go back, do some reentry. There'll be some resurgence of the virus, and people will go back home again. I think we have a long road ahead of us. And that's my rather pessimistic view of reentry right now.
Perhaps pessimistic, but likely reality, right? It just is going to be cautious and slow, and we just won't know until we get there. And there likely is a rebound, and we just have to navigate that as it comes. So I think it's really realistic. So I appreciate you sharing that. You are all fabulous and very talented and respected leaders in your respective industries. So thank you all for sharing a little time with us. I want to, if you guys can all hang on, I want to open it up for questions from the audience and see if anybody has any thoughts that they can share. So we'll do that. Thank you all for that. We've got a handful of questions that I want to get to, and Ann and Heather, this one in particular for you. Ann, maybe we'll start with you. How do you see the current situation impacting project delivery methods, plan and spec versus design build? What's your thought on that?
I think that's going to vary by market sector. I think it's easier to do plan and spec for corporate and office workplace environments. But housing, for example, I can't imagine a housing developer not doing the design build model. It's what they're comfortable and familiar with. It's how their pricing is set up. Hospitality might be a cross blend, but even then things get bid out to so many different vendors and knocked off. And so it's going to be, that's an interesting one, I think, for sure, just to watch and see what happens.
Yeah, kind of a wait and see approach. Heather, what do you have an opinion on that and your thought from a construction perspective? Heather, I think you may be on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. At Greiner, we're primarily a design build firm, but I don't see the process changing much other than we'll be over communicating even more. And I think everyone's going to have some patience as we navigate through this. But I really don't think our process is going to change much other than just more communication and everyone being like all hands on deck and paying attention to the process and making sure we're all there to make quick decisions and knowing that things are just going to be different.
And I have a question that perhaps is most pointed to you. That I see there's a lot of product reps that are on our panel discussion today. Clearly, they can't come visit you at your studio like they used to on a very regular basis and take you to lunch and do things to connect. What are you suggesting to those folks that a lot of their jobs are connecting with your designers? How do you suggest they move forward and continue to stay in touch and be involved in the appropriate ways?
I think that's got to be so hard and so challenging. We love our reps and vendors and rely heavily on those relationships with them. They make us look good every day. I had one rep did a virtual lunch and learn, and she ordered Chipotle and had it sent and delivered to all the different designers' homes. Like I think 16 people attended. She had our full attention and focus. We were all sitting there eating our burrito bowls and walked through all sorts of new product, went through their company website and looked at things. And then we were all chatting on the side. It was in Teams. And it was great, and it worked. I think that the vendors are doing the same exact thing that we are doing, that our clients are doing, our contractors are doing. We're all just getting creative and doing our best. I love that shout out to Fluid that was dropping off little kind of donuts and things to kind of brighten people's day on designers' doorsteps. And just, I mean, who doesn't want to get a package or a reminder or a drive-by honk? And I think we're all to that point where we're ready to have happy hour in a parking lot 6 feet apart and just be together again.
Totally agree. This one can be used by a handful of you, but Ann, maybe we'll start with you. Design internships and internships in general. We've got students that are graduating, trying to get through the final year of school, doing the remote learning. What do you foresee in regards to internships for the summer? Too early to tell, perhaps?
Yeah, I think that's definitely too early to tell, unfortunately. We still maintained our intern at ESG and the interior side, and I believe architecturally, but it's very limited and only if there's hours to work are they putting in time, and mostly it's setting up any rep things on the calendar. There's no library to clean at this point. So it's limited, like 4 to 8 hours a week, and it may be that we have to wait till after the 4th of July and reevaluate.
Yeah, I'll put a plug in there for IIDA as well. I think I've just been communicating with my mentee as part of the Insight Mentorship Program that we have. And it's definitely on a lot of students' minds. It's a strange time to be graduating, no matter what field you're going into. But I think any connections that professionals can have with those students just to help make introductions or point them towards resources. Certainly, we don't want to see people having to leave the field like they did in 08 and 09, and then you feel that 5 and 10 years later when you're looking for a professional that has a certain number of years of experience. So happy to make those connections, and hopefully other people can as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Megan. There's lots of resources. You just have to connect to them. Jessica, maybe one for you too. Anybody that's entering the real estate business now, perhaps challenged in the moment, but any advice to them, play the long game or anything different you would share with them?
Boy, if you're entering the real estate industry right this second, that's going to be tough. And I would recommend maybe a side hustle and a very long view. It's tough for the young folks right now. There have been some layoffs in some shops. We're very lucky right now in JLL. We haven't had any layoffs of brokers. I just sent a text when I saw that question pop up to see if what's happening with our intern program, and unfortunately, I didn't get a response yet. But we normally have a number of interns. And I would say if you're looking to get into the real estate world, hang tight and keep doing what you're doing. Right this second is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, fair enough. And last question I see up here, unless there are others that come through, developers or building owners, I know it's challenging because it's only been a month or so, but any that are in kind of the final stages of design that have decided to move forward, are they rethinking some of the amenity spaces or replanning some of those zones?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of us on this panel can probably weigh in on this, but even today we had a low-income housing project that went from communal laundry to in-unit laundry to avoid that intersection of people in a smaller space. That just happened this morning. So interesting. We also are seeing a lot of conversation about that, especially with our workplace clients or those larger, more national developers that are thinking about a lot of the things that Jessica talked about, the 2 points of thought, whether it's bigger offices or smaller offices because we're all working home. But things like air quality, more plants to, really purify and clean the air, surfaces obviously being cleanable, hand sanitation kind of stations, things like the square footage requirement per employee maybe needs to be looked at as bigger and bigger. Before we were just trying to densify. And how can we pack these people in? And I think I saw a question about benching and hoteling. I think that's going to really start to slim down, and people are going to want dedicated space for them when they're at work. And I think there will be more rules. There'll be more HR protocols, kind of driving. If you're sick, stay home. And obviously we can all work from home because we're doing it right now. I think that those kinds of conversations are going to continue to happen, and that's my dog. So there's reality.
Any other thoughts, Jessica, on anything as we wrap up the conversation today?
I feel like the theme of this week has really been reentry and reimagination, and folks are really, really concerned about how to keep their employees and their customers safe and make sure that everyone, as they're thinking about reentering and coming back, it's not just them, it's their vulnerable family members. How do we make sure we're taking the biggest possible picture, protecting the essential workers that have to be in a physical location? I just feel like people are starting from that point, and that's really where a lot of the conversations we're seeing these days are.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Well, on behalf of our panel and JLL and ESG, Greiner and Fluid, we want to thank everybody for joining us today. anybody wants to continue the conversation with any of our panelists, I just posted Rosa's email. She's with Fluid Interiors. You can reach out to her and she can connect you to the panel. And you can further the conversation with anybody in particular that you like to. But we greatly appreciate everybody joining us, and a great appreciation to our panel. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
See you guys.
Take care.